American.
Right?
Yeah.
So and his mother, her name was actually Stella, if you can imagine.
Oh, wow. Stella!
Exactly. And so my daughter, who I guess takes after Babsha, who I never got to meet, she's called Little Stella. So there you go. It's really cute. I love that. My husband will be very intrigued. So the nice thing is Sydney will let us know when we're actually live, but some people will actually be able to see this. So don't say anything that
are up now everywhere, actually.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. This is Tulani Bridgewater Kowalski from the Wolfer coming to you from Los Angeles. And I am very happy to welcome a new author to all of us, but certainly not a new author in the grand sense of things. This is Kasia Urbaniak, and we are going to be discussing her new novel, Unbound, which is absolutely fascinating. You will be able to find it everywhere online and hopefully at your local independent bookseller. We will also provide a link for it in the Wolfer on our app at thewolfer.com. So please definitely check it out. And Kasia, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Just a quick correction, a slip of the tongue, not a novel.
Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. It is not a novel. It is
Handbook for Revolution.
And you know what? It really is a handbook for revolution. I was so taken by it because I opened it up and I expected it to be one thing, and it was totally not that thing. This is like a really amazing step-by-step guidebook to exactly what you say it is, which is power. And there are so many things that you address in here that are fundamental and critical to not only women, but to people in general. So why don't you just tell us a little bit of how you came to bring this, because you're also the founder of the Academy, which is remarkable. And I've learned so much in a short amount of time about you, but also some really helpful guidelines about how I can make my life a little bit better. So let us in.
Starting off with a really big question. For a large portion of my adult life, I was a very, very successful dominatrix in New York while studying to be a Taoist nun. And these two very, very, very seemingly contradictory paths ended up exposing what I can most accurately say is the hidden architecture of power in human dynamics. And along my path, I met my business partner, Ruben Flores, who is a man who was at the time working for Doctors Without Borders and negotiating in war zones. And what we discovered in our conversations was that there is beyond language, right? Because think about where he was working, nobody spoke the same language. When I was a dominatrix, everything I was saying was a game, was a play, right? I'm the tyrant, I'm your nurse, I'm your mother, whatever. And in the Taoist path, so much of it just has to do with these unspoken things that are below the level of language. We started very, very quickly seeing that there is something going on underneath every conversation. There's a conversation under the conversation. And that women are conditioned to regard that conversation differently than men. And in that seeing, a lot of the mysteries of why things go awry in negotiations, in conversations, in dynamics between men and women, and sometimes even between women and women when one is carrying or trying to mimic that patterning, the patterning that men have. What happens? Why people freeze? Why you can go into a conversation asking for a raise and then be apologizing for the work that you did poorly, or go in with a specific request, come out, have conversations hijacked, be interrupted. How that happens, why that happens. Very recently, I had this very strong visceral memory, and a lot of it had to do with like reading emails from people who were responding to the work. This memory of being a kid, and I think a lot of people can relate to this. The introduction to human life and adults for a child, I think, can be quite brutal. And one of the first brutal things is we are born hearing the conversation under the conversation. Then adults come to us, lean in with their big faces and tell us things that don't match what the conversation under the conversation is saying.
Yeah.
And as we are acculturated, as we are raised, we are more and more and more encouraged to deny the conversation under the conversation and go with the words that are being spoken. This impacts men and women. However, the way that plays out for women ends up being very, very different than it ends up being for men.
Absolutely. And I love that you highlight that conversation underneath the conversation, because I think a lot of us are trained to discount that. You know, we're that, oh, well, I don't know, something about that interaction left me feeling X way, but
Exactly.
it doesn't match up with what actually was said. And in a weird way, it's a form of gaslighting. I don't think it's necessarily intentional gaslighting per se, but it is a form of gaslighting. And I think for women in particular, that's a huge challenge, because we become, and you talk about this really well throughout the book, we're preconditioned to discount our own voices so completely. And so when you start to have these discordant experiences in communication, especially when it comes to conflict, which we're as women taught to avoid, because as you say, we're taught to smooth it over, that creates this really challenging internal dynamic that affects how we live in the world. And I think one of the biggest parts of that is feeling safe. So when you have this competing need to like enter into a discussion, which a lot of people perceive discussion as disagreement or conflict, even a conversation, it can be scary. And we want to feel safe, but we also want or need to achieve a goal. You know, how do we kind of counteract those opposing forces?
It's a really brilliant question. So you mentioned the need to feel safe. So there's a very important distinction that I need to make off the bat, which is physical safety versus emotional, intellectual safety. So none of what I'm going to say applies to a situation where you feel physically unsafe. We've had women, and I've had experiences of using these techniques in situations of physical danger and achieving an incredibly powerful and positive effect. However, once you are physically unsafe, it would be irresponsible for me to A, tell you to continue the conversation. B, there are biological forces at play that shut down parts of our capacity that make us more vulnerable. So physical safety off the table, right? So you're in a physically safe environment, you are physically safe, but you want your goal, your desire, you want to have influence, you want to get the other person on board, you want to get them not just to wilt, get beaten down and agree, you want them fully on board, like big, full-bodied heart, mind, yes, 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 right? And then there's this need for safety. So this need for physical, not emotional safety, that also has to be addressed as its own thing. Why is it that in a conversation where there's no physical danger, a woman might feel unsafe? And here I could spend all our time together with just that question.
Right.
Because the way we're conditioned to use our attention means that when a woman's put on the spot, which she will be more often because we're obsessed with how women are and not what women do. We're obsessed with what men do and not how they are. So when she's put on the spot, she's going to put attention on herself as well. What am I doing wrong? What signal did I get off? Was I leading this person on? Is this person right? Is this criticism I need to take, right? And that will cause a freeze. Mm-hmm. The tragedy of the freeze is most women who freeze after the fact punish themselves. Why didn't I stand up for myself? Why didn't I use my voice? Yeah. And self-attack is a surefire way to not heal, resolve, grow, learn. We have this idea that if we punish ourselves, we learn better. Stop that. Don't do that. It's not true. It's when we celebrate and lean into something that's working that our bodies remember. Okay. So now we have this whole architecture. Freezing is just one example of what happens in these attention dynamics, how conversations go in a direction we don't want. All these things, not knowing when we're going to freeze is one of the things that makes us feel unsafe. So learning learning how to get off the spot, learning how to flip the dynamic will make a woman feel the safety she needs in order to know that if the conversation goes somewhere, she can always pull it back, Okay.
Mhm.
Now for women who are not going to read the book and learn all those ways of flipping the dynamic, controlling the attention of a conversation, I can say one thing that will not only provide that safety, but also heal men and anyone carrying that gendered patterning, which is this. You control the pace. Never move faster than you can feel. So what that means is, in a given interaction, remember, you can say pause. You can ask a question about a statement. Those signals we're talking about, something feels off and I don't know what it is. Are you saying this? Hold on. So this is a whole area where people try to be smart by being fast. They override feelings because it's stoic. You want to be clever, so you say things quickly. You get the answer quickly. No silence. Boom, 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 right? Conversations moving. It appears to be fast. Nothing gets done. Things get overlooked. It's like I was watching The Biggest Little Farm recently, and one of the sages, the gardening guru sages, was saying, there's always enough time to do, there's never enough time to do it right, but there's always time to do it all over again. In a given interaction, what appears like effectiveness and speed, oftentimes is where you lose people, you get lost, false agreements are made, false yeses are given, assumptions are tested and questioned. And so what I'm leading to here is, when you control the pace of a conversation and do not move faster than you can feel, you're not only giving time for your emotions and your body to catch up to what's happening intellectually, which moves faster than anything else, you're also allowing the other person to be introduced to the world of the embodied conversation.
That's very powerful. Yeah.
The embodied conversation is a connected conversation. The embodied conversation contains magic within it. If I have a desire, you have a desire, they appear to be competing. It is when that conversation becomes connected and embodied, that is when the synergy arises that dispels this idea that the success measure is compromise, meaning a democratized version of dissatisfaction. You're a little unhappy, I'm a little happy, all's fair. And the embodied conversation allows for a synergy where a previously totally unthought of option can satisfy both desires even better than if those two competing desires were met. So the safety is introduced in the simplest form. Again, there's a whole world of practices and tactics and techniques to control the power dynamic. But the simplest one is slow it the hell down and feel the entitlement of asking questions, pausing, doing what we call location, which is, you seem interested in this part. Is that true? This part seems a little off to, your body ruffled a little bit here. Is there something there? Or be like, hold on, you're speaking too fast. I need to catch up. Okay, like women have trouble asking. This is well documented. But even in the span of a conversation, leading the pace of a conversation will have asks in it that women might not notice they're hesitating to make. I'm going to take this package of a human being, this man, wholesale. I'm going to take this job wholesale. And I'm going to take what's being said to me wholesale. I'm not going to look at it. It's not even nitpicking or discriminating in some kind of harsh way. It's be like, where are we? And when women, especially in business environments, start, definitely in relationship and in family, but even in business environments, when they do these disembodied Zoom calls, and they feel the grounded, legitimate ability to have their hand on the speed dial. Everyone's ideas become more on point. People's yeses become more full-bodied. And now it's harder to track. Where you at? Where you at? Where you at? They looked off screen. Did somebody enter the room? My panicked body feels like somebody entered my room. All that. It's about attention and moving with the speed that we actually feel, think, and move at.
Yeah. And you said so. I just like, I'm kind of interjecting because I feel you said like at least, and I'm not exaggerating, at least 50 things in there that are really critically important. And which is why I really, and I'm not saying this to sell your book, but I do want your book sold. People really should read this. And even though it says A Woman's Guide to Power, I do think that it's for everyone, because a lot of what you're discussing in here is about creating an environment of mutual respect. Because by slowing the conversation down, by really having these embodied discussions like you just described, you're showing your self-respect, and you're also modeling for whoever you're engaging with to treat you with respect and themselves with respect. And then all of a sudden, the entire dynamic shifts, and the temperature of the room can change very rapidly. And I love that. And I also, in my other life, I am literally a negotiator. I'm a talent manager, and the win-win. I preach the win-win constantly. There is no reason why in any kind of relationship, someone has to lose. As soon as someone has to lose, I believe you're asking for the wrong thing, or you don't know why you're asking for that thing. And so you get into a lot of that. The freeze really could be an entire semester-long conversation. And I feel it's that important, because I feel, and you mentioned that it happens to everyone. It does more acutely happen to women. I have had so many women who have come to me and talking about things that happened 25 years ago. And they're still self-flagellating, which for people who aren't familiar with self-flagellation, beating yourself up about something that happened decades ago. And a little bit of that informs your future, right? Because you've patterned these experiences into a truth, which is not necessarily true. And so we start predicting outcomes before they even happen, and we end up getting in our own way. And you talk about that as well. And it comes in, it's kind of a double-edged thing. We anticipate a no, so we say no to ourselves. Because we're so afraid of the no, then we don't actually ask for what we need, and it becomes self-fulfilling. So of course we don't get it. So I'd love for you to just kind of touch on no, because in your work as a dominatrix, which I love it. I'm so fascinated. And for someone, just for anyone who's listening, to be a professional dominatrix requires so much skill, and it requires so much psychology, and it requires so much empathy and compassion and knowledge and trust. And then the Taoist studies are just such a deep thinking, really incredibly not only intellectual, but spiritual and emotional journey. So to have all of that coming together in one person is incredibly remarkable. So, seriously, I would love to spend months with you. But back to this no, because you talk about that a lot. How do we not become afraid of hearing no, but also not afraid of saying no? It's a big one.
So I have your question about no right
Yes.
here, right?
We can come back to it.
We slowed down what would be a conventional way of doing an interview, which I love. I love that you jumped right in, and like we are in a really, really deep, solid pace. So I also have the experience that during the lead up to your question, you said about 50 things that I want to respond to or add to. So let me pick two. And I hope I remember everything, right? 1, 2, and then the no question. The embodied conversation and men. This is a book that applies to the human experience. However, even the term man up means stuff down your feelings. And women raised in the patriarchy will also castrate a man for having feelings. I mean, things are changing, and how, so I see women as the access point, because for all of the negatives that our conditioning has given us, we don't have full permission to have feelings without being called emotional, but we did not have the kind of emotional violence, we had a different type, the emotional violence that men have when they're told to man up. So the outcome of a lot of this training is that women become very well equipped at training the men in their lives, the ones they're interacting with, first and foremost, to meet their own desires, to be heard, right? But the nice side effect is that they're training men to do something without calling it out that they're actually not really allowed to do and conditioned not to. Why do you think so many well-meaning men end up accidentally sexually harassing, interrupting? They are told to be disembodied to a degree where those conversations where a man will say, this is the fact, these are the studies, this is the way we're going, is what he's doing in response to man up and be the kind of person who will sacrifice their lives, go to war, shut it all down, right? So, so that's the piece we're having now. A lot of men come to the school wanting to train. You know, it's a big question. What do we do now? What do we do now? The second thing, now I've lost track of the second thing before no. Let's just go to no then.
Okay.
So the simplest, quickest answer for what a woman can do is find a partner, call a friend, and say, we are going to practice hearing the word no. 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you for things. I'm going to ask you for a castle, for the moon, for a back rub, for all of your belongings, for you to be my servant, all of it. And you're going to say no. And then after 5 minutes, we're going to switch. The no is a rare occurrence in most women's world, but it's a boogeyman. So a woman will hear no, and her body will go through something. So that practice of 5 minutes each, and switching 5 minutes, does something to make you aware of this really big feeling boogeyman that's not that big. Now, I want to add something to that. Because of attention dynamics, when a woman is asking for something, she will have a tendency to only put her attention on the other person for a moment before she puts it back on herself. So when she hears the no, it feels like it's a no to her, not to her request. This is very essential. The no will feel like it's homicide. It'll feel like, and it's only where your attention is. If you hear no and your attention is on the other person, you see that they're saying no because resistance has arisen in their body. That's blameless. They're, you know, because most women don't even get far enough to hear no on a daily basis. They get false yeses, they get deflections, they get nailed and put on the spot. Oh, the self-fulfilling prophecy. The self-fulfilling prophecy. So the no, because of the unpleasantness of the experience of hearing no or something like it, but feeling like it's a no to us, ends up destabilizing the dynamic and destroying the embodiment of the conversation. No is a gateway to the connection point, to intimacy. Because when somebody says no or resists something, it's usually blameless. Like very, very, very rarely will somebody say no just to mess with you. Very rarely. Mostly it's their own submissive experience, right? They'll tense up, they'll say no, stop that, right? And if you look at them and you get curious, you saw resistance arise. Not say, why not? Why no? But go, what's happening over there?
Yeah.
That is the point. Nobody defends something they don't care about. So they perceive an attack on something that's precious to them, something they care about. It could be their vanity. It could be something that you don't think is that important, but they think it's important, right? It could be something really deeply meaningful. It could be trauma. It could be anything. When you find out what they really care about behind that no, and connect to that, then you have two burning, life-filled desires. The amount of influence you're able to achieve in a conversation after hearing no far supersedes an automatic yes. Because you're getting the landscape of the other person, you're getting where they're at, what they most care about, what they're most afraid of. And if you put your attention on that person, you can see their entire being body reveal that. And that's where it starts. So my students, when they hear no, that's when they get excited. That's when they get turned on. That's when they're like, game on, yes. Not because they're going to bulldoze the other person, but they know they're about to get to the good stuff. And that what comes out of this conversation will be the equivalent of 50 lame ass conversations. It will be like the game changer. And it, you know, This is why learning about the attention out and the attention in state becomes very important. Because when your attention is out and you're watching what somebody else is experiencing and speaking to that, there's no room for self-consciousness. It's not about you and it's not an attack on you. And again, women are trained in times of panic and duress to put attention on themselves and question themselves and freeze and go into that inner conflict build, and then self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
I don't want to ask because it's going to suck. I might get a no. So I'm not, so they won't even ask for the full Monty of what they want. They'll ask for 25%, 80% at best. Now, another tragedy. Woman asks for 99% of what she wants. The other person goes through the trouble of doing it. She gets it. Animal body conversation, they will know. They will know they didn't give you an orgasm on some level. They know that you didn't light up. They know that it was, they won't know why, but they'll know. They'll be, oh, and this is what happens in long-term heterosexual marriages very often. Why even bother trying? She's asking me for this, but why even bother trying? Because that hit of lighting another person up doesn't happen when we ask for 99%, 100%. It happens at 100%.
Yeah. That's really, that's such a significant thing for people to keep in mind when you're engaging in any kind of interpersonal dynamic, professional or otherwise. You're doing not only yourself, but also the other person a grave disservice because you're not allowing them to give you what you want. And I think a lot of people mistake that simply because you want something, inherently that's negative or it's selfish, it has some sort of negative connotation, when in fact, what I find is that most people are really actively looking to give, but they don't know what, and they don't know how, and they need a little bit of guidance or instruction or a timeline or something. But most people do actually want to step up and give back because I think anyone who's ever done any kind of philanthropic work, and you certainly know with Ruben and Doctors Without Borders, there is almost nothing that feels like doing a good thing. And a good thing can mean anything.
Right.
There's a beautiful power in that.
Yeah. Also, there's another component because we live in a very transactional society. So our thinking tends to be very transactional. Like I'm asking for something, so they're giving me something. What's not seen is that human interactions are beautifully richer and deeper than that. If you ask somebody for something bigger, it looks like you're taking more from them. You're also giving them a bigger role. So now women are, praised and praise themselves for being really independent and not needing anything. What they might end up doing is making their partners completely useless. I'm doing all of it. This person's sinking to worm level. You make a request of somebody. The school started because I asked Ruben to give up his career and just help me support a dream that wasn't even identified yet. He stepped into a role that was the equivalent of like, let's change the world. And before that, he was very kind of like, I was doing my thing, he was doing his thing. And it was already too much. There wasn't enough time for dating. There wasn't enough time for, and it was the bigger ask that go, oh, this could compete with a war zone. I'm down for this. I now have a bigger role in Kasia's life. He has a bigger role in mine. So what looked like a huge, impossible ask actually ended up being an elevation for the both of us, just raising the game. And in terms of like 99% versus 100, I love, like, this is one of my this is like my own personal fairy tales. I think about the first woman who ever got pregnant while having a job and was like, yeah, all right, I'm gonna just screw it, I'm gonna be insane, I'm gonna go to my boss and be like, I'm about to have a baby and I'm not gonna work for a while. I want you to pay me anyway. And then after the baby is born, I'm still not gonna work for a while and I want you to pay me anyway. And then after that, I'm going to go back to work and I want the same pay I used to have with nobody replacing me. How's that sound? It sounds crazy. So when we don't ask for 100% of what we want, we're not just shortchanging ourselves and shortchanging the other person's possibility to elevate and to occupy a new role and play a new game. We're also quite possibly not changing the fabric of human society because things get changed one conversation and one outrageous ask at a time.
Yeah. Yes, that's beautiful. That is absolutely perfect. I know we're coming to the end of our time together, but I just want to know if there's, so our audience is particularly focused on women who are really in the center of a pivot. I mean, we're all culturally, I think globally in the midst of some sort of pivot, hopefully towards a positive new direction. But for women in our demographic who are predominantly 40 and over, as we're pivoting and we're change making, I think that your message is just as important for us as it is for the generations that we're perhaps nurturing either through mentorship or coming behind us, perhaps our own children. And so I'm wondering if there's one little pearl. I feel like I've extracted so many from you, but if there's one little pearl that you think applies to these pivoting women who are transitioning out of one phase of life into another, that could be really helpful. I think that would be, if I could just impose upon you for that. And I know I'm asking you on the spot.
I just entered that demographic myself, and I spend most of the time in the school, like not just trying to keep up with, but try to like fake staying one step ahead of the wisdom of women over 40. I mean, you know, if anything, the value in the times that we came up in, and like there's such a difference to young feminism and like our mature feminism, because we've had our asses kicked. We've seen that we started at a workplace with a guy and like they superseded us. We've had our hearts broken. We've had those conversations, the really tough stuff, and been like, what the hell is this? What the hell is this? Like, this isn't working. This isn't working. And the nuance of the understanding, not in like kind of a social justice, theoretical, intellectual way, like this is sexism, this is wrong, but like in a deeply wisdom of the body kind of way. Like we are the most important right now. Now, one thing I would say is, especially for us, we more so were raised with an anti-anger, anti-rage mandate. And we are more likely to have accumulated it in our being and in our bodies and had to shut it down and numb it out. And what rage looks like when it's numb is tiredness, exhaustion, lack of life purpose, no direction, numbing of instinct. And the tricky part of rage is that for it to become its purest form, passion, directed energy, life force, it has to pass through a really chaotic, messy middle phase. And what happens if there's 3 stages, the sleeping stage, the chaotic phase, and the enlightened phase? What we do in this culture is we go from sleepy to chaotic and then back to sleepy. Oh, that's too much. I'm just wrecking things. I'm being a destructobot. Right. And it's about finding the space to go all the way through that rage until you're like, oh, I now know not just what I'm fighting against. I know what I'm fighting for. And in my body, it's now moving and I can shoot lasers out of my eyes and I know exactly where I'm going. And I have the energy and I have the purpose and I have the passion. That fire is meant to light us up and carry us through the world. And if it's half tamped down, it's a nuclear weapon. And if it's all the way tamped down, it's killing us.
Yeah.
So it's about moving all the way to the other side of the arc of rage. That's what I would say to women like us who've had it. We've gotten our asses kicked. We didn't even know what was going on. Now people are telling us, oh, you were really shut down here. Like, look at these patterns. People are talking about it now. Should I be angry now? I should have said something then. Why wasn't I angry then? I just rolled over because everybody else did. You know, it's time to find the beauty at the end of the arc of rage.
I am lived. I'm probably going to live some more through that entire arc. That is so beautiful. Thank you so much. That was really spoke to me so very deeply. I always joke I sit on an abyss of rage. Anyway, I want to thank you so much for spending this incredible time with us. I want to just remind everyone, please pick up a copy. You will not be disappointed. And also to visit your website. It is your name, so it's kasiaurbaniak.com. Follow you on Instagram and on Twitter. I know you have a ton of wisdom just on your website alone. You're very generous with it as well. So to everyone, please do yourself a favor. You will not regret it. Unbound. Need to
Thank
have
you.
it.
I just want to add really quickly, because my name is hard to spell, you can also go to weteachpower.com and you'll be redirected to my complicated spelled name.
As a fellow complicated spelled name person, we must push the public to embrace our names. As I said to my doctor this morning, I'm empowering you to say my name properly.
I'm giving you a free lesson in pronunciation. You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kasia. This was absolutely delightful. I so appreciate it.